right. Well, back tonight, back today with me, we have Rob Richardson and Dave Waldman. We're going to talk a little more about integrity. We packed a lot into that last discussion, a lot of conceptual, philosophical things about integrity. We kind of picked the topic apart in ways that hopefully made it understandable for some of the guys that are watching this or anyone who's watching this for that matter. Tonight, I want to dig a little deeper into the practical side of it for you guys because integrity is kind of a big topic. I mean, we burned through an entire hour just talking about it last time. But I want to make sure we have left something actionable that the guys could actually see themselves following through on. And in that, it's probably important just to talk about your experience with how you do it. So let's dive right in. Dave, you want to go first? How do you figure out what's right and wrong?
Well, that seems to be the $10 million question, right? What's right and what's wrong? Well, I mean, I think there's two different sides to what you're kind of talking about there, right? Like how do I implement integrity, or how do I kind of put integrity to work for me every day, and then kind of what's right and wrong? Um, I think when it comes to integrity, I just don't really think about it much. I think from my perspective, when you have integrity, it's just kind of a part of what you do each and every day. You don't really kind of think about it. And for me, especially when it comes, I think, to difficult decisions where you could make a decision and be like, well, that's an easy decision, but it's kind of sketchy on the integrity side or what the ethics side or something like that, right? It's like you can take the easy wrong over the hard right. Sometimes is something I kind of live by, and sometimes you've got to make a really hard decision. That's the right decision, but it's maybe going to make you look bad. Maybe it's going to make you have to take responsibility. Maybe it's going to make your company be in a position where they could lose money. But it's the right decision from an integrity perspective or from a conscious perspective, right? And sometimes that's where it gets really dicey, I think, for a lot of people when you're kind of put in that quandary. Which way do you go? And I think really it just comes down to the person that you really are. What do you value? What are your core beliefs? How were you raised? And I think a lot of those things play into making the right decision from an integrity perspective over making the wrong decision for kind of all the wrong reasons. So I mean, that's kind of what would be my opening salvo there, Pete. I think it's got to be part of just who you are. And sometimes those decisions aren't easy, but you're going to be put in those positions. You're just going to have to make the right decision at the right time.
Okay. I want to hear Rob's spin on this if he's got one.
So you want to know how I determine what is right versus what
Yeah.
is wrong?
Yeah.
Um,
It's an easy question, right?
well, honestly, a lot of it has to do, with feeling as much as it does with the intellectual side of it. You can feel it. I mean, you can feel when something is wrong. It's far more difficult to say. But there's, I mean, there are feelings of guilt, shame, reservation that come up in you when you're
Okay.
about to do something that it's very important to listen to those feelings, often to think. Determining whether or not something is right can be far more complicated because I mean, there's so many levels of right. Um, yeah, this can be tricky. I mean, is it fair? Sometimes things are right even when they're not fair. But is it just? Is it true? Is it kind? There are so many things that go along with what is right. So, um, honestly, a lot of it has to do with your core values, your belief structure, has to do with the circumstance of what is happening. Sometimes the exception applies to a rule, and in those moments, the exception is right, whereas on the normal everyday topic, the exception is wrong. if you follow where I'm coming from. So right and wrong
I
are
think so.
a little trickier than just laying out a roadmap. If you get where I'm coming from.
I do.
If
I
I
do.
could, Pete,
I
if I
do.
could just build on that for just a second, Rob kind of touched on something there. How do you tell what's right from what's wrong? And it's, sometimes it's like a feeling, right? And I think there is some truth to that, right? Um, as kids, and that's certainly through your life, you learn certain things, right? You learn right from wrong. Your parents teach you right from wrong. As you get older through your career, you gain wisdom, right? You gain knowledge, you gain experience, and those things kind of help teach you right from wrong as well. Yeah, I mean, at least, from what your experience is. But I also think, Rob's kind of hit on an interesting point here, in that right and wrong, integrity, however you want to kind of put that, there is an innate feeling that you should get right from your just who you are as a human being, that tells you and helps steer you from right and wrong, right? You don't. I would say the majority of people, right? I don't have the data to back this up, but the majority of people just know intuitively, like killing somebody is wrong. You don't need to go around telling people, hey, murdering somebody is wrong. You just kind of know that, right? It's just something that you just are kind of, that's just kind of there. And so I think, to Rob's point, there is a lot that goes into your self-awareness that helps guide you in determining what is right and wrong, as well as other things. But it is a major factor, I think.
Okay.
I'd like to retort.
Okay.
Have you seen the movie Frailty?
No.
Really? Oh wow. Okay, that's a great movie, guys. Okay, so imagine you're, a 6-year-old kid who's being raised by a possible serial killer who tells you that God wants him to kill bad people. And so you're raised in that environment. Would you necessarily instinctively know that that was wrong?
Well, that's why I said the majority.
See,
I think
here I
there's an
go with
exception.
exceptions.
I think there's an exception to every rule here, right? I mean, to your point, well, Hollywood can turn a lot of things into something.
Okay,
That's fair.
But no, there is Rob.
here's a real story. Here's a real story. I was raised in an environment that had a very gypsyistic kind of viewpoint on theft. And I was 19 years old when I realized that stealing was wrong. I truly did not believe it was wrong. Um, and, I had a whole system about how I did it and whatnot. And, from my point of view, insurance companies were the only ones getting hurt, da, 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 da. And it wasn't until the first time I saw the impact against a human being, when I first realized that I wasn't stealing their stuff, I was stealing their safety and their security. That for the first time in my life, I realized just how wrong theft was. And from that day forward, I have never stolen a single thing. So my point is sometimes right and wrong has to be learned the hard way. But once again, it boils down to a sense of feeling, and for me, once again, I believe it is so much easier to determine something is wrong based off of the feelings you get from it than it is to determine it is right based off the feelings you get from it, because that can be deceiving and that can have a lot to do with greed or your own personal ambition or what you get from it. So not always are the feelings that make you think it's good are true, but when you feel that it's wrong, you should always listen to that. So
Yeah, and there's actually I the way I understand it, some physiological tie to how you feel when you're doing something wrong versus when you're doing something you know to be right.
Mhm.
I mean, you either get a feeling in the pit of your stomach where it's just not quite right, or you somehow dissociate from your core. Whereas when you're standing on firm belief and you're standing for yourself, you speak stronger, you carry yourself stronger, you're not afraid of being noticed. Any number of things that people reflexively do when they're doing something wrong is almost like they're hiding.
I would agree with that completely. And I don't have the science on it either, but it definitely, from my experience in life, sounds true.
We've all witnessed it, right? And we live in a culture where, fortunately, I think, to a large degree. Trust is kind of the foundational understanding between people interacting. You know, they found that in one of the surprise, like often, especially these days, with the cynical way the world will view things, you see that when eBay got started, one of the concerns that people had was that someone's sending me garbage and they're going to send me a check that bounces. To the point where they actually set up brokers that would handle the transaction. And those brokers quickly went away because most people actually were fairly honest in their transactions on eBay. There was no need for that market because people tend to trust each other, which is part of what's so disruptive when you encounter someone you can't trust, because it tells you everything you need to know about them and a whole bunch about yourself and how naive you are in interacting with people. And I'm not saying that that means you need to give up on trusting anyone. I'm saying the foundational elements of the interaction you were engaged in were not reality. Something was missing, and that leaves you with a dissonance that you need to fill to actually figure out and move forward and grow from. And fortunately, we don't live in a society where no one can trust anyone, because those tend to be pretty rough societies to live in. Anyway, Rob, you were going to say something there?
Yeah, you know, I believe that trust is freely given. It has to be. You know, you can never earn trust until somebody gives you the opportunity to betray that trust. So we must give away trust openly and freely. And then, of course, honestly judge the results of giving that trust away. And, you know, I believe that when people show you that they can't be trustworthy, you need to accept them for that rather than that which you would want them to be, which is why I tend not to deal with people once they prove to me I can't trust them. But I also believe that's a better way to be. I would rather get burned every once in a while than to go through life so hard that I can't give a stranger the benefit of the doubt.
Did you experience that side of life, Rob?
What, getting
Like when you
burned?
no, going through life not trusting anyone. Like when you just went
Yes.
through how your perception on theft was different. Like, can you tell us a little bit about what that was like for you on that side of living?
Isolationism, pure and simple. I'll be honest with you. I've recently come out of it. I spent the last 4 years of my life not leaving my home. If I didn't go to work, I didn't. I mean, grocery store, work, that was it. If I didn't work with you, I didn't know you. I lived in the same town for 4 years and didn't make a single friend other than 3 people I worked with. It was just, you know, when I did it, when I withdrew like that, I really believed I was protecting myself from the outside world. I was shutting out all the negative people. I was shutting out all the bad things in the world, and I just withdrew myself. You know, just me, my wife, my children. And I believed that we could just be that little an island unto ourselves, and life would be grand and good. Um, but the truth of the matter is what it did was it people are social creatures. We need each other. You know, without going out and trying to make friends, without interacting with other people, without having that conversation, without bringing in those ideas and putting forth myself, I just became smaller and smaller and smaller until honestly, I don't even know what I was living for. I was just going through the motions. And the truth of the matter is since returning to the world, I guess, I can say I am truly far happier. And, you know, once again, I have goals and dreams, and I'm moving forward instead of just being stuck in that stagnant little shell where I was trying to hide away from the hurt and pain.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
yeah.
Dave, you were going to say something?
Well, I was just going to probably add on to a little bit of what Rob was saying there about trustworthiness, right? And I love his attitude on this, right? That I'd rather trust somebody, let them work to break that trust rather than go into a relationship feeling the opposite, like, okay, everybody is untrustworthy, right? And you have to earn my that you are trustworthy. That's just a hard way to live. And I think that I also have tried to really live by that. I mean, certainly, I think life's circumstances sometimes might get you into well, this is called a funk, right? Rob said he withdrew, right? But you can get kind of in a funk or something where you're like something happens to you where you do withdraw, or you're not as willing to be, to put yourself out there, right? To really not only for yourself, but to have others trust you or you to trust others because you've been hurt in some way, or you've been, as Rob said, burned in some way. And at least I can't speak for Rob or for anybody else in the call. There have been times where, yeah, someone has violated my ability to trust them, insofar as for whether it was work, whether it was a relationship, or the like. And the tough thing, I think sometimes is finding the forgiveness to forgive somebody for breaking that trust, maybe even giving them a second chance. And that's a hard thing to do, because we all make mistakes. We're all gonna, trip up every now and again. So it's to the degree of how bad did someone violate your trust? Did they get a second chance, or don't they? But to Rob's point, I think at some point when someone has clearly demonstrated on a routine basis that they can't be trusted, that person just is somebody I just don't have in my life anymore to be able to to do that. So, and Rob, for you were talking about kind of living in your own little you withdrew there for a while. I used to love watching those Alaska shows, living off the grid, and I used to tell myself all the time, that's me. I'm going to Alaska. I'm going to live off grid for a while. But I think I would probably like, and I consider myself an outdoorsman. I could be probably in pretty good shape surviving for a while. But I think to Rob's point, we're, as humans, we are naturally, we naturally gravitate towards being around other people. And so having relationships based on trust, and based on truthfulness, is really important. And like Rob, I'm willing to put my soul and put my relationship out there based off of that, and let somebody try to violate that, kind of kind of going forward.
Okay. And it's interesting. You talking about that in the context of the well, first of all, this isn't a new idea. Everything we're talking about here today it goes back centuries, right? I mean, if you read Dante's Inferno, it's like a spiral down through the pits of the depths of hell, going through item after item that demonstrates a lack of integrity, right down to fraud and betrayal, which are, he places betrayal in the ring directly above Satan. That's a pretty rough spot for somebody who can't be trusted. So, I mean, and that's going back to what, the 1500s, 1200, when exactly, I don't know. We're not going to get the year on Dante right now. But regardless, this is pretty important to a functioning society. Rob, we're going to.
Yeah, I want to say two things. And first off, betrayal is an ultimate evil, because betrayal only happens from those you love and trust. You cannot be betrayed by an enemy. That is reserved for those that you care for, which is why it is so hard to survive, and so hard to not survive, but to handle internally. And I just want to make a real quick point about what Dave was saying about forgiveness. I think it's really important, especially for all our viewers, to understand that forgiveness is an internal thing. It's all about you, and has absolutely nothing to do with them or what they did. It's about you becoming okay with it. And that is not the same thing as being okay with them. And I have learned that I can forgive people and still completely understand that I don't want that person or that kind of person in my life. Simply because I don't want them to bring in what they do and who they are. So, yeah, sometimes, I mean, if it's a small offense and whatnot, you can, yeah, people make mistakes. You don't just write everybody off on everything. But when we're talking about serious offenses that require, time to forgive, I can forgive them and not have to give them a second chance just because I don't need that kind of person in my life. And I think that's important for our viewers to understand, because that's what it's really about. It's about you becoming okay with what happened, not with you being okay with what they did.
Yeah, Rob, it's a fair point, and I think, you know, just as we have all kind of learned in through our relationships and our programs that we've been in for our viewers, right? Forgiveness also helps you kind of with your healing process, and I totally agree with you. You can forgive somebody, and you know, but you don't still need that person in your life, depending on what's happened and how egregious the issue was. But forgiveness is also just about, is like you said, it's about you as well, but it's also about helping you on your healing process for whatever has happened, right? I mean, you can take a hypothetical, but you know, that helps you kind of move forward in your own life.
And the important thing I'm hearing through both of those is, and some of what you said before, both you said before, do you wait for someone to do that first, or do you take the initiative and do it yourself when it comes to either forgiveness or trust? What do we
I'll
teach
take
men
a
to
quick.
do? What do we teach men to do in the program? Do we teach them to wait back until somebody else starts leading them, or do we teach them to lead
Yeah,
themselves?
no, right. I was going to say, I was going to take the quick shot at this, right? You've got to lead, right? And you've got to lead by example. I think it's important for, you know, you to take action as quickly as you possibly can. Each person's going to be slightly different, right? I think when it comes to that, again, it depends on the how you know, what the violation was of trust, right? And how deep that runs. I
Sure,
mean,
sure,
you know, something small, okay, you can probably handle that relatively quickly and work to address that, work to correct it, work on the forgiveness side of this, or however you want to do that. But you know, the deeper the wound, the deeper the strike there, the deeper the violation of trust, you know, sometimes that may take a little bit of time to step back to,
sure,
right, Rob, this is right in your wheelhouse as far as I'm concerned, right? To step back, to reflect, to contemplate, to ensure that you're going to respond appropriately as opposed to overreacting to what's happened. And for some people, that could take, you know, couple of minutes, maybe a couple of hours. Some people might need 24 hours. But we've kind of learned through our process, right? You don't want to let anything fester for more than 24 to 48 hours if you can help it, right? You want to
sure.
try to work your way through that, go back and address it.
Okay. So we're coming to the conclusion here that it is an internal decision you're going to make to trust. You're going to be the one who initiates that and encounters the world with that attitude. How do you know whether you did that every day? Do either of you have a practice that you go through regularly to assess yourself and the way you're living the integrity you value?
Um, well, you know, I'm a real big fan of self-reflection, and journaling, which ties in greatly with self-reflection. It's a wonderful tool. Um, you know, I personally like to set aside 30 minutes every night, just before bed, after the kids are in bed, after everything's quiet, when it's just me, sit quietly and essentially play the day back in my mind, right? Like play it forward like a movie on fast forward. Um, and it's really important when you're doing this to try to set the ego aside, right? And do it in a non-judgmental way, which is why I constantly talk about mindfulness meditation and how it helps you to look at your thoughts in a non-judgmental way. It's really important that as you're doing it to simply look at what was said by them, what was said by you, what was done, you know, and try really hard to remove intention, you know, what you thought they meant, what you um, what your intentions were versus what you really said, right? And by going through this motion, it allows you to have a clearer picture of what happened during your day. And what I usually do is I spend 20 minutes reflecting on the day, diving into the encounters and what went down. And then I usually spend about 10 minutes, maybe 15, writing. Um, And there's a beauty to this because as you think it through, it brings it all back and it makes it fresh. And when you write, it actually, the mind becomes very clear when you're actually pen to paper. And so it takes the running of the thought out and allows you to, focus and fine tuning what you're doing. And you get it down on paper and then you go back through it and you read it real quick. And then I let it go. I try really hard not to carry more than one day at a time. And I try really hard not to reflect on anything more than one day at a time. And what this does is it allows me to look at the encounters of the day. It allows me to look at where I allowed fear to not allow me to give someone the benefit of the doubt. And that's not to say that, we all know certain people who you can just tell when they're talking, it's the greatest fish story of all time. So, naturally whatever, dude, and move on. That's not what I'm talking about here, but, you can't allow your fears to cause you to not trust. And you will see that in the pattern of the day when you go through this process. Also, it will help you to see whether or not you were truthful today. And that's something I wanted to talk about. There's a big difference between saying the truth and speaking the truth. What one has to do with the words coming out of my mouth are true. I'm not lying. And the other one has to do with actually speaking truth. How you feel about something is true. Whether or not you stand up for the person next to you who is being ridiculed or put down by somebody else in an unfair, unjust manner that makes that you can feel in your core, this is wrong. Do you bite your tongue and say nothing, or do you speak the truth? Because I think that this is important, and I think it gets overlooked. Because I can go all day without saying a lie, but if I stand there and watch that happen and don't speak up on behalf of the person who can't speak up for themselves, even though I feel it is wrong and I should, then I have not spoken my truth. And I think that counts. And I think that's important to it being integral, is being willing to stand up and speak your truth in all circumstances. And so, you look for things like that too. Could I have intervened here? Should I have intervened here? How do I feel about it? And I go through this process. And like I say, when I reflect, it's all about, what truly happened and trying to keep the others out of it. But when I write, I try to dive into how I felt in the moment when these things were happening. How do I feel about it now, looking back at it? And this allows me to be in tune with my emotions about it and to understand the feelings that I was having at the time and now, so that I can be more aware of it tomorrow in the moment when I have those feelings, so that I can catch it day by day. And this process starts slowly, but after you do it for weeks, months on end, you actually get to where you become more aware in the moment, because you're looking for these moments, right? Because you're going to write about them tonight. So not only are you more aware of the moments as they're happening, you become more aware of how you feel in those moments, because you're going to write about that later. Does that kind of help you to?
Yeah, and when you get started with that, do you feel anxious about it when you're paying attention to those interactions through the day? Do you find yourself distracted by trying to pay attention, or is it more natural? What did you experience with that?
For me, it's more natural. And once again, this process, I've been meditating off and on for 20 years. And so, I not only do I do mindfulness meditation in the mornings, every morning, I do a gratitude meditation. I do a 5-minute intention meditation where I set my intentions for the day. And then I sit and I do a 20-minute mindfulness meditation. But I find it very easy to be mindful in the moment, to simply be present with what is, and to not be daydreaming, thinking of the future or the past. And I think it's one of the things about my current job that people like so much is when I interact with customers, I am fully present with them. I call it 5-minute friendships, right? Because the average transaction takes about 5 minutes. And during those 5 minutes, I can usually get people to open up with me and share with me like we're old friends that we haven't seen. And it's all about just truly being present. And this comes from the mindfulness practices. And so as a result, even when I'm in a situation that feels uncomfortable, not quite anxious, but where your adrenaline starts to pick up because it's just like the tensible situation between other people. It's really not overwhelming. It's more like it's kind of like watching a movie but being part of. You know what I'm saying? It's not that intense. If that
Okay.
helps you
No, it does.
understand.
It does. I was just thinking of it in the context of, a guy who's never done this kind of thing before is just getting his feet wet with it. And, he's
It
hearing this.
is.
He's like, wait, you what? I have to pay attention to how much here? It can be a little overwhelming,
Um,
right?
it is, and I mean, don't get me wrong. The first night you do this, you are not going to be able to literally sit back and fast forward your entire day through your mind. That comes with practice, but you are going to be able to sit down and look back on the day, and you're going to be able to remember key moments when you had high emotional feelings, right, based off of whatever was happening that the mind will remember. And so at the end of the day, you'll be sitting there, and there will be, I don't know, half a dozen moments from your first day that really stick out to you. And those moments, dive into them. Sit there and try to replay that entire scenario. What was happening right before it? How did it lead up to it? What happened in the moment? What happened afterwards? How did I feel? Did how I felt trigger on and afterwards for the next 3, 5, 10, 15 minutes? How long did it take for me to calm down? Was I anxious for a half hour? Did I get angry? Did I take it out on the UPS clerk who showed up 40 minutes later? You take those moments that stand out and then you try to expand on them and over time and write about it because that helps you to focus it in and get it out clearly. And over time, if you do this every single night, in less than a month, you'll be replaying most of your day relatively easily. And the reason why is because the first day is really hard. But the second day, when there's high moments like that happen, you'll think of it right after it happens. And then you'll try to recall those details. So that night it gets a little easier. And by week 2, if you're starting to do this all day long, you're calling these things out to you. And it will also help you to recognize the good moments in your life. Because I'm not talking about just bad, stressful moments. When you have a major success, these moments are key factors too. Write about those. Write about how you felt. Write about what your part is in it. We talk a lot about accountability, and I love ultimate accountability, extreme ownership. That's a great book. But the truth of the matter is I don't just need to take accountability for the negatives in my life. I always should take accountability for the positives. What was my part in that? What did I do that led up to that victory, to that success? Guys need to take and write about those as well, because that will help you to live in the positive and to see the blessings in your life. And when you can turn away from the negative and start focusing on the positive through this process, it will greatly improve the quality of your life. It will greatly improve your self-esteem and your confidence, because you will look at yourself in a positive light instead of, I'm a loser who's losing his wife and my job's falling apart. And, I mean, we all have problems, but that isn't the focus of my day. My day doesn't focus on my problems. It focuses on the opportunities and the positives and the wins of my life. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
and
Pete.
last week we had a few different definitions for integrity, right? There was the top two involved honesty, right? Forthrightness. But the other one of the others was completeness, whole, being whole. And I think the way you explain that really pulls both of those together. It's one of them is speaking the truth, and the other one is actually telling the truth, right? So, Dave, how about you? What's your integrity self checkup look like?
Yeah, I'm going to build on what Rob said. I mean, certainly this group knows, you know, what we do from a meditation, reflection, journaling kind of perspective, and Rob hit on this, right? As he was kind of talking about his point, and that is, to do reflection, and journaling and be self-aware. If you're not used to doing it, it does take time, right? Rob said he's been doing it for 20 years, but he laid out a really good example there that, you know, any habit that you want to get into takes 21 days to kind of get yourself into that habit. And he kind of talked about, if you do this on a daily basis, within 2 weeks, you'll go through this much faster, and the like. And I do agree with that. Because to kind of do it and to do it well and to do self-reflection well, it does take time to kind of make sure you're kind of doing that and doing it on a regular basis. One of the things that I think I would want to build off of here, and this was hard for me, right? And this kind of brings a lot of this conversation full circle, where I've talked about kind of, getting, getting yourself, not involved in society. You're excluding yourself from going out and doing things other than going to work in the grocery store. But I think one of the other really kind of key components here is, having a trusted friend or a mentor or a coach or somebody or a confidant that, as you work through some of these self reflections, right, whether or not you're being truthful with yourself or honest or integral, with a decision or something that's happened through the day, it's great to get with somebody that you can be like, hey, Rob, I had this issue yesterday. I thought about it. I reflected on it. I was doing a little journaling about it. Here's how I kind of handled this or went through this. What do you think? Did I handle this the right way? Am I responding to this in the right way? Am I being truthful about how this is happening? Because I think sometimes, especially for the viewers who are going to watch this, if you're just kind of getting involved in this, there is a thing, that you can be a little bit biased against yourself. Oh, I did pretty good with that. I was, not going down that road. And sometimes just getting a fresh perspective from somebody that you trust, right? And back to this trustworthiness piece, that can be an honest friend with you or an honest mentor with you that can say, Dave, maybe you didn't handle that in the best way. Maybe you didn't go down the right road here. Have you thought about this or have you thought about that? I think is a great way to kind of make sure I stay within the checks and balances for myself of, did I handle that the right way? Did I handle that in the most trustworthy way? Did I handle that in the most integral way? And that's just something else that you can kind of put into your toolkit there, right? And I think as you get more seasoned along in your journaling and your reflection, as you've kind of become more aware of some of your own biases or, pieces on how you react to something, I think then maybe you can probably do things a little bit more on your own. But I think another great tool would be just to be able to, rely on, somebody else that can kind of, you can talk some of those things through with. Yeah. Rob, you want to add on to it?
I, I wanted to ask a quick question there before we move ahead with something else. Just speaking from the perspective of a lot of men today, is that an intimidating thing to take on?
Oh, for
Sharing all
sure.
with someone else?
Oh, oh, God, yeah. I mean, man, I'm just sorry, I'm jumping right in there with that. But I mean, I struggled a lot with being vulnerable. And I'm not going to go into that whole litany piece for me, but it's for me, for Dave Waldman, and I'm sure like with other men, it was not natural for me to come back. Hey, Pete, I'm really struggling with this, or I'm having this feeling of this, and it's like no, bury that. It's get a big shovel, dig a really deep hole, throw your emotion in there, and it'll be fine, and just move on. And that wasn't healthy. And it wasn't healthy for me. It wasn't healthy for my family. And it wasn't doing me a lot of good. And certainly over time, it built a lot of resentment in a lot of different areas for me, which, doesn't ever end well when you have a lot of things that you kind of keep inside of you, especially when it comes to emotional. So for me, it was extremely hard to do that. But once I got to a position where I had men around me, and I'm saying this from a men's perspective, right? I'm sure it's the same for women, where I could, talk to other men about certain things. It just helps me immensely. Just kind of, give me that checks and balance, like I said, just make sure you're kind of going down the right path there. So yeah, that's how I kind of my
Okay.
position there, Pete.
All right. Well, thanks. Go ahead, Rob.
First off, I want to say, Dave, I love you, man. When you first came into the group, it was like cloak and dagger. The way you would share. Uh, but I mean, it took you a minute to warm up and open up to us. But there for a minute, it was challenging to try to fill in all the blanks. It was like trying to read a redacted report that just had a bunch of blacked out spots. Um, but but you did eventually, open up and gain the confidence to start trusting in us. I just would like to say that, it is very hard for men, especially, to open up and be honest with um, with their guilt. That more often than not, they can't share because they're terrified that they bring it out into the light, then everyone else who they tell is instantly going to feel the same way about them that they feel about themselves because of it. And this is what builds shame. And that shame is kept in the dark, and it festers and it grows and it overpowers. And it is why it is so important to find someone, some safety net, some group that you can open up about these things and get them off your chest so that you can learn how to heal from your mistakes and your guilt so that you don't have to carry that shame with you because it will choke the life out of you.
And
Um,
does
but I would like to say, Dave, that you're 100%. Real quick, my whole I have 3 calls a week, and the whole thing is about coming to me with the issues you're working on, and me helping you to reflect on it and try to figure out the pieces. And even I do that. I don't do it in the call as much, although sometimes I do share about my reflections and what's going on in the call. But when I need to bounce something off of somebody, that's when I call one of the other mentors in the group. And I'm like, hey, look, I'm dealing with this and this is what I'm thinking, just to get their feedback. Because I don't care what level you're at. We all go through those moments where we just need to double check ourselves and make sure we're not lying to ourselves. Because unfortunately, I have always lied to me better than anyone else ever could. And I have to constantly watch for that. Go ahead with what you're saying.
yeah, and I think that really quick, the has finding a men's group like that will help you along with that accountability in all areas made it easier for you to assess yourself in the areas you value so deeply.
Well, yeah. Well, look, again, I'm jumping right in here. I would say a resounding yes. Now the challenge becomes, right, um, getting yourself to the position where you're like, hey, yeah, it'd be kind of nice to be part of a men's group right here. In fact, I was just talking about this in my leadership call last week, right? You don't know you need help sometimes, or you don't know what you need until you hit rock bottom, right? Whether you're in a relationship issue, and you don't know you need help working through relationships, well, until you hit rock bottom. You don't know you need, if you're an alcoholic, you don't know you need problems until you hit rock bottom. A drug addict, you're addicted to pornography, you're know you need God in your life, whatever it is. For the majority of us, we don't know we want to make the change in our life until we hit rock bottom. I always like to say the only person in the whole world that likes change is a baby, right? People don't like to change, and people don't like to, kind of, especially when it comes to their own kind of self-assessment of like, wow, I'm really struggling here. I need help. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm just speaking for me, but it wasn't something that I would be like, wow, I need help. I need to go join a men's group or something along those lines. But now that I've been a part of that, right? But again, I had to hit rock bottom. I mean, I was about as far on the bottom as you could go. But it was that eye-opening experience that led me to this, to get a part and to be a part of a men's group. And again, not all men's groups are probably created equal, right? You got to get in the right one. But to get to a men's group where you have trusted friends and mentors and people who will speak the truth to you, is, to me, is so invaluable. And again, I don't care kind of what your topic is, but if you can get around a group of men who, that you can trust and are godly and can steer you in the right direction, there are so many benefits to it. And you don't have to do all the talking, right? I mean, there is so much that I learned by just being a part of some of these discussions and listening to other men talk, and listening to our other mentors and our other coaches give advice, and it's so profound, right? I always like to say you've got two ears, two eyes, two nostrils, one mouth. Six of those are input mechanisms, and one's an output mechanism. So to me, that means you can really learn a lot by just participating and even listening. So yeah, I'm a fan.
Okay.
I cannot speak highly enough for this group or what it has done for my life. The truth of the matter is for 20 years ago, I started a spiritual journey to try to figure out who I was and what I wanted and what I needed and what all this was all about. And it was honestly, it was all about me trying to figure out how to be okay. That's how it all started. I just wanted to figure out how to be okay finally. And I traveled a lot of different roads and I learned a lot of different skills, and I used them at different points in my life, off and on, during that time. And after my brother was murdered, I had a real crisis of faith. And slowly, over the next 5 years or so, I stopped doing all of those things. Right. And I never really did them all at once, but they were just different like tools I would pull out, for different things and would use for a while and then move on. But during that time, like I said, I slowly but surely stopped doing all of it. And then, like I said, I spent that, 4 years there basically completely doing nothing. And when I got into this group, actually, right before I got in this group, I started meditating again. And when I got into this group, I learned so much from Cass and, the camaraderie, the brotherhood of the group, and, being able, realizing there were men out there I could trust, that I could open up with, that I could learn from, and that I could lean on, and also that I could share what I had learned. And that sharing of what I learned is what caused me to dig back into my bag. And for the first time in my life, I started implementing all the skills that I had learned before, plus started taking on new skills. And I'll be honest with you, I really believe that that is why I am in such a great spot I am today, is because I'm not just, and it's also why I'm so adamant about teaching these skills about reflection and meditation and self-awareness to the members of the group, is because they tie right into reset, and they are just so fundamental to the joy and the acceptance and the knowing that I have inside of my life. And I think every man can benefit from that. So, yes, having a group like this is so important. I'm truly grateful that I have a place where I know that I will be accepted. And although when I am wrong or acting in a way that isn't in accordance with my beliefs, the men will call me out on it. They will not judge me for it, and they will accept me for who I am and help me to see the error of my ways so that I can fix it and move forward, rather than to be found guilty and condemned.
Okay. Excellent.
I'm just going to add on to just 2 seconds on that, Rob. That's beautiful. I love the way you said that. Wrap that up. You weren't judged or you weren't condemned for that. And another huge eye-opening piece for me to be a part of a men's group like this. That it's not only fear of being vulnerable, but it's fear of being judged, fear of being found out, fear of being, hey, I'm not I have faults and I have flaws, right? And that's okay, right, to have that. So I love the way you wrap that up, that you could be someplace where you weren't judged and the like. So love that.
Okay. So we've got daily reflection. Once based on what we know to be right, wrong, and how we want to move forward and interact with the world. We've got accountability, either with a group or someone we trust very closely who shares our values or at least knows us very, very well. Anything else you guys would recommend the man do if he's trying to build this into his life?
Surrounding yourself with people who are trying to grow, it's so fundamental. Jordan Peterson has 12 laws, 12 rules for life. Rule 3 is all about surround yourself with people who want to see you improve. And I think that is so important, having people who want you to rise up, want you to do better is great. And it's fundamental for helping you to do so. However, I think it is equally as important to make sure that those people too are wanting to grow, are wanting to rise up, that are equally striving to be better. And I think that's one of the greatest things about this group is it's all the men in it are trying to improve themselves. They're trying to grow, to be 1% better tomorrow than we were today. And this reflection process I'm talking about, journaling, this will help you to keep track, like what the whole point of this call to value is about, is how do you measure that so that you know you're getting that 1%, so that you can keep growing on it. And like I say, just the value of having others in your life who that is their goal as well. It helps to propel you forward and help you rise up.
I would say to add on to that, Pete, I would say two things, right? If you want to grow, first thing that I would say to you is one, make sure you check your ego at the door, right? There's no room for large egos here. You're going to have to kind of understand that you're going to have to kind of set that aside a little bit, regardless of where you are or what you do in the outside world, how successful you are. You're going to have to check your ego, right? That's first and foremost, because I think that's going to open you up to growth and to learning. And I think the second piece of that would be to never stop learning, right? And whether that's you're in self-awareness, getting a part of a men's group, whether you read self-help books or whether you do any kind of individual research or the like, never stop learning as part of your growth part of this, right? And I think by doing that, by never to stop learning, yeah, you're always going to learn new skills, but you're also going to help yourself create a purpose in your life, right? And having a strong purpose in your life is going to help you, I think, rise up to be a better person and a better man kind of overall. So those would be the two things that I would add on to what Rob said there.
Yeah, meaning is found in journeys, not destinations.
That's correct. Absolutely.
Definitely. You guys have any thoughts you want to share to close us out tonight?
I'll go first real quick and then I'll
Mhm.
let Rob kind of look. I think, to your original question, how do we kind of implement or how do we know right from wrong or how do we implement integrity in our own lives? And I think it's again, we gave some ideas here. We talked about some ideas, but it's going to be a very individualistic kind of thing, right? You're going to have to do some self-reflection. You're going to have to do some checking your ego at the door. You're going to have to do some self-discovery here a little bit on what may or may not work for you. And my advice to whoever is watching this is don't rush the process either, right? Take your time, enjoy the journey, as you just said here, right? You're going to learn more through the journey than in the end state or accomplishing the overall goal here. So enjoy that. Give yourself time and grace to work through that, and wherever you can. Find a good friend or find a mentor or find somebody that you trust in that can help guide you along the way. And I think that would be my closing advice to anybody who's watching.
Mhm. All right. Rob?
Just start. I,
Mm.
I, seriously, uh, imperfect action will always lead to a more perfect action as long as you do not give up. So, you know, I, I agree with David in the fact that you don't want to rush, but at the same time, just start and it will grow. As long as you don't give up, it will grow. You will find what works and what doesn't, and you will tweak your system as you move along, and you will come up with a system that you can use to hold yourself accountable and to measure and to grow. And it's really that simple. I agree 100%. It's easy to say that I'm going to be more integral, but if you're not trying some way to keep track and know that you are, so you know that you can grow, you're getting better, then you're just talking. So try something and just start and keep moving forward and don't give up.
Yeah. And that's, I think both of you just summed things up really well because, I think in Dave's, I hear something that's echoes the idea that one of the enemies to actually following through on integrity, one of the hurdles that many people have a hard time getting over in order to reach that goal or to live that value is their own pride.
Mm.
Because it takes actually being able to admit having the humility, which is the virtue that acts against pride, to actually admit that you have something to learn, you have ways to grow, you're not perfect, and you're not going to get it right every time. And then Rob, you come right in there and on the back of it, right after Dave, you follow up with basically saying perfection is the enemy of progress. Just get moving. And if guys really want to get moving, they're all welcome to join us. That's for sure, right? We're always looking for more guys in this group. Everybody's welcome. There's very few things we haven't seen, heard, or had some guys tell us. I mean, that's nobody's alone out there in what they're dealing with. There's plenty of guys out there who can help out. So coming up, I'm looking forward to the next couple episodes of this coming up soon. We've got some big ones planned as we go try and tackle at least one value at a time. I know in the next couple of weeks we've got the book coming out. Cass's book, Disrupting Divorce, The New Man.
Yeah, if I may.
Goes on sale on the 16th, right, Rob?
Yes.
Go ahead.
On September 16th, you can buy the book anywhere books are sold. Ebooks will be available for sale from every ebook source except for Kindle. It will not be released on Amazon Kindle. But you can get the ebook on September 16th. Pre-orders are already up and running. If you go to newrockpress.com, you can pre-order the book now. And yeah, check out the book. It's going to be great.
All right. And you guys, anybody in the program can find Rob on Monday nights, Wednesday nights, and Friday nights with his reflection calls. And Dave hosts Spiritual Leadership on Thursdays. And we're all humming around the chat. If you ever have a problem, you need to drop something real time, one of us is usually in there to help you out. So thank you guys for joining me again tonight. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet, Rob. Thanks for having me. Pete, thanks for having me.
100%. Yeah. Glad you're doing this, Pete. I love it.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.